fine. Today is Monday, May 16th, 2005. I'm Kathie Bernstein, and I am talking with Dr. Paul Jacobs today. Paul has been a member of our community how long?
1961, so it's now 44 years.
You didn't consider yourself a Milwaukeean. Where were you born?
I was born in Brooklyn, native New Yorker, and came here in 61 to practice with Dr. Joseph Stone and Louis Kagan, and consider it the best move of my life.
Yes. Were you married to your wife at the time?
Yes.
Is she a Milwaukeean?
No, I met her in New York. Well, we'll go back a step. I grew up in New York. I went to college went to high school in Brooklyn, college at Syracuse, medical school in Brooklyn, an intern at Kings County Hospital where she was a nurse. And the doctor married the nurse, and actually I went into the Navy. When I got out of the Navy, we got married. Went to Detroit for a year of residency, came back to New York for my orthopedic training, and at that point, at the end of that training, I met Dr. Stone and Kagan, and I wanted to get out of New York. Did not have any idea where Milwaukee was, I will admit, as a typical Easterner, and came here, and we lived in an apartment for a couple of years, bought a house, and have been there ever since.
Are you on Lake Drive?
Right.
Yes.
Yes.
I think I was at a meeting at your house 1,000,000 years ago.
Hopefully, yes.
A long time ago.
Well.
So your name, of course, Jacob,
does not have any special meaning. Jacob, of course, biblical, but Jacob's quick family history.
Yes, I would like the family history.
Okay, my great-grandfather, Abram Jacobs, I have his naturalization papers of 1876.
Oh, so he was
So he came here right after the Civil War, as best we can figure out. And that's really all I know about him. But his son, Benjamin, I have his birth certificate. And on the birth certificate, it mentions the name of the parents. And for Abram, it said place of birth, it says Russia. So we know he came from Russia. I remember being told that he came to Brooklyn from Canada, from England. And so he worked his way across. And then Benjamin married Dora from Russia, and they had Leo, who was my father. My mother's maiden name is Samrock, came from a shtetl somewhere near Bialystok. She came over here when she was, 4 or 5 years old. Her father had come to New York, got a job in the garment industry, got some money to bring the wife and kids over, and that's as much as I know of her side of the family. And she married, and I had one sister who was older who passed away a couple of years ago, stayed in New York, and I ended up wandering out here.
It is sort of out here, isn't it?
It's, I have found, quite honestly, that most native Milwaukeeans don't appreciate it as much as those who come from elsewhere and realize the quality of life in Milwaukee is so much better than in New York or Brooklyn or what have you, where you have time and space, and it's a real sense of community rather than the much more impersonal New York.
What about the arts, culture, and that? I mean, we can't compete.
You're not trying to compete, really. The only thing I really would say I miss from New York was theater. There are only 2 places in the world that have good theater, New York and London. Yeah, the road shows come through, but they're different. But even when I was in New York, we wouldn't go for 6 months, and we'd go for 3 or 4 shows, and that would be the good ones from the season. I'm not an opera devotee, etc., but there's plenty of theater in Milwaukee, and there's, if you wanted, you could go out every night and do something.
Yes.
I think Milwaukee's a great community, and I say that sincerely.
Good. Well, you will put you on our Chamber of Commerce or something.
Well, we have had several occasions where either my office trying to entice someone to come to New York or at the synagogue trying to bring a rabbi in. It's not an easy thing to do, and you really do have to let them know what Milwaukee is like, because the average person has no conception of what this city is all about.
I know.
Or its Jewish community.
I know. We're a small Jewish community. You mentioned synagogue. Which synagogue are you referring to?
I was president of Beth Israel. We joined, it's conservative. I was, I guess, what you call modern Orthodox in New York.
How were you?
Came here and we joined Beth Israel, and then I was president, and I'm still semi-active on the board. My claim to fame may be that I was responsible for bringing Rabbi Panich into the community.
Were you? Well, that was a good move.
And actually was co-chairman of a committee that brought Rabbi Herber, who hopefully will also spend 25 years here. So.
Right. I had a note that you were also a member of Kehilat Torah.
No, that's not true.
I'll take that out.
No, that's in error.
Okay.
I have a lot of friends there, but no.
Uh-huh. Why did your grandfather come to America? Do you know at all? Not at all?
No.
Because he came in an early...
Well, my great-grandfather who came, no, I have no history of anything about him. My grandfather, interestingly enough, was very successful, became a wealthy man, and then went bankrupt during the Depression, and that was the end of that. My father was a physician and a family doctor. My mother's father came here, I'm sure, for political, economic reasons, to eke out a living, and he worked in the garment industry and eventually got some money together and owned a delicatessen in Queens.
In Queens. That's amazing. So what kind of, you say you were modern Orthodox, what did that mean? Modern Orthodox is a relatively new term.
What it meant in those days was an Orthodox synagogue, which in Brooklyn almost all of were. I only know of one Reform temple there. But it meant that on the high holidays the women sat separate from the men, but on regular Shabbos, if the women sat with the men, nobody really cared.
Really? I never heard that.
The rabbi I only knew one rabbi in my life. He bar mitzvahed me, married my sister, buried my parents, and the synagogue is now a Baptist temple and what have you. All the outside plaques were sent to Israel, and it's defunct as the neighborhood changed. But it was a great organization, a rabbi there who was stable, and I only remember the cantor, as a matter of fact, probably there 20 or 30 years.
So did you have a kosher home, and did you light candles? Did your mom light candles?
The home was kosher. My grandparents lived with us for a while. When they moved to be with one of my aunts and uncles, one of my father's siblings, we're not kosher. Don't eat ham and pork and shellfish, but not strictly kosher. Observant. The kids grew up in an observant household, and one of my daughters, Cindy, became assistant principal of a Hebrew day school in New York, and is still involved in Jewish education and stuff. And another one of my daughters is vice president of the synagogue in Appleton. So we've kept them involved.
You did a good job, didn't you? You really did. So you had a bar mitzvah. What about anti-Semitism, or did you live in such a Jewish area? And what about in medical, in college, and things like that?
I have made the statement on occasion that in my life, have never felt anti-Semitism. Probably a bit of an exaggeration. Growing up, my high school had 5,800 students, and was not considered a big school. It was an average high school. As I think back, I would guess that I doubt if there were 100 non-Jews in the whole school. So it was certainly a Jewish atmosphere. No one went to school on high holidays. Either the teachers were Jewish or the students were Jewish, so the schools in New York pretty much closed. Went to college in Syracuse, where maybe 20–25% of the student body was Jewish, so you felt perfectly at home and comfortable. Getting into medical school was tough in those days because you had the guys coming out of the Army, plus the kids like myself coming out of high school, and it was a great deal of competition. The feeling was, all things being equal, you would not get in, and it was our job to make sure all things were not equal.
So how did you?
We studied a little harder and did a little better, and as a matter of fact, I only finished 3 years of college. I was accepted to medical school and ran, and now I go back to university to take some courses just for the fun of it.
Here,
At
are you
UWM.
retired or?
No, I'm still working. I am going to retire at the end of July in a couple of months.
Oh.
So I am at the end of my medical career. When I came here, of course, I went to Mount Sinai. Oh, to go back on anti-Semitism, I applied to Henry Ford Hospital for a residency in general surgery, knowing Henry's reputation, but I've always had the feeling if they're not going to accept me, let them make the decision. Why should I make it easy for them and not apply? So I applied and I got in and had a wonderful year.
Oh, you did? Huh?
It was a fabulous teaching experience. I then decided to go into orthopedics and went to the Hospital for Joint Diseases in New York, which is a hospital supported by the Federation.
Oh, it is? I didn't.
And interestingly enough, there were 18 orthopedic residents, 17 who were Jewish, and an Italian Catholic kid who spoke the best Yiddish in the whole group because he was a true linguist, and so Joe was a unique guy. So I really didn't feel I came here. Yeah, I applied to Children's Hospital and did not get accepted, but a year later they took me because I had been running conferences and seminars there, and they sort of had to. And of course, practice at Sinai, where all the Jewish doctors were in those days, and that's changed a great deal.
Oh my, yes. Well, that's where we all went to have our babies. At least I did.
It was a wonderful place, and me being a total stranger in town, got to know everybody.
Sure.
You got to know all the Jewish doctors, and there was the Women's Auxiliary was great for Betty to be involved in, and there were a lot of I think the community was very close-knit. There was a lot of volunteerism, which you see less of, unfortunately, in these days. But it was an excellent hospital. It really was very, very good professionally.
Can I ask you a question about Sinai? Where is it going? What do you think? I'm really interested. Like that inner city.
It's not. There are other hospitals in this community that are more inner city than Sinai, although Sinai's reputation and aura is such. It's a downtown hospital.
Right.
And in this day and age, it's really not going anyplace. Because it's part of the Aurora group, Aurora will always maintain St. Luke's as its main institution. They opened the Heart Institute at Sinai, pretty much defunct because all the cardiology moved to St. Luke's. We do a lot of orthopedics there, and
Where?
At Sinai.
Okay.
And our practice is at Sinai. We do have an office at St. Mary's Ozaki where we do a little work. It's nice. There are people who live in the suburbs who feel anything south of Good Hope is a terror area.
Yeah.
So for our practice, it's worked out fine, and we do enough volume there that they're very good to us as far as equipment and material and scheduling and things. But I don't think it will ever reach the status of a teaching, research, major institution that it once was. And this is true. I'll divert. Good Housekeeping has yellow pages in the middle which tells you special things. And 20 or 30 years ago, they had a page on how to pick a hospital. Board qualified doctors, affiliated with a medical school, accreditation, etc. The last sentence of the article was, if all else fails, go to a Jewish hospital. There are no bad ones.
Oh my
Now, when you think of Michael Reese in Mount Sinai, New York, and Cedars, Lebanon, all over the country there are very good Jewish hospitals because I think Jewish doctors went to a higher level. That, of course, is no longer true. Half of them are closed. I was in Brazil, in Rio, trying to deal with somebody in a market, and Portuguese is not an easy language. So we were thumphing through. A little girl walks over and says, "Would you like me to help you translate?" And I said, "You speak Portuguese?" She said, "Yes." I said, "Where did you learn your English?" She said, "I was born in Brooklyn." And her mother walks over and very proudly says, "She was born at Brooklyn Jewish Hospital." And I, of course, turned to her and said, "I was born in Brooklyn Jewish Hospital." We hugged each other. There was that kind of pride in the institution, and it was a very famous institution. Einstein had his surgery there, et cetera, et cetera. It's no longer, it's now Interfaith Hospital. I think Michael Reese has either closed or changed its name, and as the neighborhoods changed, the hospitals have changed. Jewish doctors congregated together because they couldn't get into other institutions. That's no longer true. Hospitals are dying to have doctors because they need patients. So that whole, where is Sinai going? It's probably going no place. It's just going to be what it is now. It's a good hospital, but I'm sad to say I don't think it's any longer a great hospital.
Mm-hmm. What is a great hospital? St. Luke's, or do you don't want to say?
I would say St. Luke's is probably the #1 institution in the community. Freighted, of course, being a teaching hospital, has some advantages and does a lot of good work. There is some town gown dispute in Milwaukee, which is unfortunate, which never was present before, but in the last 10 years probably has grown up. Dr. Kagan started the orthopedic program at County General Hospital, and I helped him run it, and Ray Weissman was instrumental in the teaching program. There was a great community spirit. That's no longer true.
But there are a lot of Jews out there, and they're heads of departments and things like that.
Right, but it's...
and a lot of them come from the East.
In a separate world. Yeah, they're academicians rather than... but they're all doing private work, competing with the private practitioner, and it leaves some discomfort in the community. It's the town gown situation, which is much worse in Madison. Madison has major warfare at times.
No kidding.
We haven't gotten to that yet.
See, that's interesting. This is something I know nothing about.
It's, as I said, you could spend an hour going over the hospital stuff.
Well, you certainly gave me a good idea. We were talking about your background, and you were bar mitzvah and so on and so forth, and you didn't eat. You kept kosher when your grandparents were with you?
My grandparents were there, kept kosher, and after that, it's sort of semi-kosher type of thing. I always, probably more than some of my friends, had a feeling for. As a matter of fact, when I was in the Navy.
Were you in the war? Were you in a war? Korean?
Well, I got in just as the Korean War was ended, being drafted as a doctor when they were no longer drafting anybody, but physicians were still going. And uniquely enough, I'm the only person I know who went overseas for the first Sinai campaign. Unbeknownst to almost everybody, I was in an amphibious fleet, and 6 ships loaded a battalion of Marines in '56 and went over in case America got involved in the war. Okay. We never did. The British and French semi-did, and then, when the war ended. But that was my overseas experience in the service. But when we were in the Mediterranean was Rosh Hashanah. There were 3 Jews on the whole ship, but I ran services just because I felt it's something that should be done, type of thing. And then went to services in Athens for Yom Kippur, which the Navy arranged. So I sort of, leaned in that direction. I say when I came here, eventually got involved in the synagogue, and I think there's the Jewish community in Milwaukee, well, it's only, 24,000, something in there, is relatively close-knit. Most of the Jewish community. The Federation will find everybody. In New York, Federation doesn't find anybody because there are so many. They go after the big givers, and the average person just gets lost in a shuffle. Right. You don't have the close-knit feeling among the middle-class, everyday Jew. They go to services, they do their thing. And, of course, there are big Hasidic communities in Brooklyn. There are, Reform congregations more in Manhattan. but the close-knit camaraderie of the Jewish community is much better in Milwaukee, and makes it a nice place to grow up and to raise kids and stuff, and we've been very happy with that.
Good. I don't remember who told me to call you, because I did call you for the interview. You didn't invite yourself. But they said that you had worked with the Brewers, and I know that Ray Weissman told me one time he worked with the ballet, and he said, oh, their feet were so terrible.
Yeah, it's...
How did that happen, and what was that like? And is it fun, or what?
It was a major experience insofar as when the Brewers came back to town, after having no baseball team here and Bud Selig being intimately involved, they took the doctor who had taken care of the Braves, and he was older and much less interested and obviously wasn't working. So the head of Sinai suggested Luke Hagan, who was chief of staff at Sinai at the time, so someone he knew. Bud and the general manager and the trainer came over my house, and Joe, Lou, and myself were there, and he made a pitch for us to take the team. Lou was not at all interested. He was a sailor and wanted to go out on a sailboat. And I grew up in Brooklyn as a baseball fan, so I said, yes, I would do it. And over the next 25 years, it was an interesting experience. Got to know the players. I enjoy baseball. The players could not understand that I'd be in surgery at 7 o'clock in the morning and finish at the office at 6 and come to the ballpark and see the players and have dinner, stay for the game, get home at 10:30 or 11 o'clock and what have you. But I like baseball, and I met a lot of interesting people, from the governors and the congressmen all the way down to local business people, and of course knowing the players, and eventually became president of the Baseball Physicians Association, operated on a lot of both Brewers and people from all kinds of other clubs, and met a lot of interesting people in the whole baseball hierarchy.
Interesting how?
The various commissioners before Bud and what have you. Ray Kroc, who owned McDonald's, owned the San Diego Padres. He had a meeting at his ranch in Santa Barbara, to which I was invited, representing the physicians and things. So it was a broadening, expanding experience.
Was it a lot of work to have that position? I mean, it sounds to me like it was more than you probably thought you were going to.
It's a lot of work. I have a high energy level, and anyone who works 12 hours a day is only putting in half a day.
Yeah, I see. Okay.
So I like baseball.
What about Betty?
Betty, well, what my routine was, I would come to the ballpark, and we had 4 box seats behind the dugout. Betty would come with some friends and 2 couples, and we would stay there. Sometimes she would come. Sometimes I would be there alone. At the beginning, I took my daughters. I have 4 daughters, so I'd take them. And then I found out if you take your kids, you're a chauffeur. But if you take one kid, how many fathers sit for 3 hours with one of their daughters? It was, and so I would take them one at a time, and we'd sit there, and some would come more than others, and and they got to know, some of the players, and felt comfortable at the ballpark. But it was, one of the few togetherness experience I had with my kids, because I was so busy and stuff. So I took advantage of that. And if I was alone, sometimes I would just go up and sit with Bud and meet some interesting people that way. And so it was a good experience. And after a while, it did get to drag. My partners ended up taking it over, and eventually the team has gone elsewhere and what have you. But for 25 years, it was a big part. It also was professionally good because you operate on Robin Yount, and 17 kids in high school who have injuries want to come and see the same doctor. So,
Sure, of course.
so from that standpoint, it was good. But I did improve my practice and did get to be friendly. Robin, as a matter of fact, knew his wife, his kids, his mother, his brother. It really became part of his family. And Bud very generously invited us to Cooperstown when he got installed in the Hall of Fame.
Nice.
We had a party for him the night before, and so it was, I say it's part of the experience, which I took advantage of. Life is made up of serendipitous events, and I've published a lot of orthopedic papers and presented papers at the American Academy and things, none of which I ever planned, but somehow someone asked you to do something, or someone had a project that they needed help on. Next thing you know, you're deeply involved in some research or some follow-up studies and what have you. And I enjoyed it. It's, once again, a lot of work, but it was all unplanned, unscheduled. It just sort of happens, and you take advantage of them because they're exciting experiences, and that's what leads you on.
So if you were on the positive end of serendipity, so to speak, what have you planned your retirement beyond university classes, or is serendipity going to?
Well, we travel a lot,
Yeah.
particularly since the kids are gone. Betty and I both enjoy traveling. We've been to over 100 countries,
Oh,
and
my word.
hope to keep that up. By accident, literally, we were in Florida this winter for a month, and some friends showed us around. We ended up seeing a place we liked. We bought a place in Florida.
Mm-hmm.
We're not moving there, but we're going to spend more time there, still do some traveling. Do have a daughter in Virginia, a daughter in Florida, 2 kids in Wisconsin. So that involves some more traveling. I always tell people, as an orthopedist, I'm a carpenter by trade.
Yes, you are.
And so I have a workshop in the basement, and I build things, and I have some projects in mind that have more time. We'll be doing that.
Like what? Give me a project.
I've built some minor furniture. I built a lot of toys for the kids.
That's nice.
And I'm a do-it-yourself guy. Place in Florida is not too far from a Home Depot, so I checked into that before we bought it. It's the things I like to work with my hands, and I intend to continue to do so.
Yeah, I think surgeons just do. I know so many of them who do. If they knit or they carpenter or whatever.
Right. It's
That's who you are inside, and you know.
Yeah, I could not exist without a workshop. Building things or fixing things or
Fiddling around.
It drives Betty nuts because any project in the house takes twice as long because I have to do it myself, and I have to figure out how to do it before you get it done. But I do some plumbing, electrical, carpentry. It's
Are you
always
into golf and things like that?
Never played golf.
Physically, but because surgery is physically taxing, isn't it?
No.
No, you're standing on your feet.
I could stand at an operating table for 5 hours and not think a thing of it, and walk into a shoe store with my wife, and after 5 minutes I'm absolutely going out of my mind. I can't sit still. So you just don't notice it when you're busy and
you're enjoying
accomplishing something and enjoying it. So that's not a problem. I never had the time for golf or the interest. I did play a lot of tennis at one time. I haven't recently, but hopefully that's something that I may get back to doing as well. Mm-hmm. As a kid in Brooklyn, you played in the schoolyard. It was softball and basketball, and we did that literally 3-4 hours a day every day. I'm not going back to either one of those sports.
No. Other than Beth Israel, have you been, I know you were a campaign worker and certainly a donor to the Federation for years, and were you involved in other agencies, Jewish agencies here in town?
Yeah.
Which ones were they?
Well, I was on the
Sinai. of course,
Sinai,
yeah.
I was on the
Right.
executive committee and assistant chief of surgery. Beth Israel, where I was the first president and organizer of the Milwaukee Synagogue Council. We got all the presidents together, was trying to unify the community. I was on the board of Wisconsin Society for Jewish Learning. I was the team doctor for the Maccabi games in Uruguay when we had the Pan Am games.
Oh, my.
And I was head of the medical staff when we had them at the JCC here a few years ago. Okay, I taught at Hadassah Hospital in Ein Kerem, Jerusalem.
Did you?
And then after the Yom Kippur War, where they needed help and they wanted people who they wouldn't have to orient, I was asked to come back. And I went back there, and there was just work. I was literally an intern resident on the staff because they needed help. The great part of that trip was just before we were going, Rabbi Panich organized a group of our friends from Beth Israel to come and visit Israel, and my daughter was going to be bat mitzvahed a few months later. Went to him and said, how about doing it in Israel?
Oh, that's nice.
And he was planning to do it at the wall with my daughter, and probably the only thing she ever learned in Sunday school, but she decided to be bat mitzvahed on Masada.
Oh.
And goes down in history as the first bat mitzvah in the history of Masada.
Oh, really?
And so that was a unique event. So I've been involved in Hadassah and Hadassah Associates and stuff like that.
Was Betty a Hadassah person?
Betty was involved in Hadassah. As a matter of fact, one of the presidents of one of the group was sitting with a group a few years back trying to have a brainstorming session on how we can get people to join Hadassah. And someone said, well, how did each of us get involved? And it got to this one gal, and she said, my orthopedic surgeon signed me up. Betty was membership chairman one year.
I see.
And so when this woman who moved to town and didn't know anybody, and I suggested, join Hadassah, this is how it's done. I got Betty and signed her up, and 10 years later she was president. So yeah, Betty's been involved in a lot of things, the sisterhood at the temple,
Yeah.
and all kinds of stuff going on.
How do you see our Jewish community? You've been here long enough, certainly, to have an opinion. Has it changed a great deal since you came? Other than, I'm not talking about Sinai now, I'm talking about the communal setup.
No, well, first of all, the numbers have been stable. Over
Yeah.
40 years, the immigrants and the emigrants seem to balance out. And it's interesting to me, a lot of kids who leave or go to Chicago, work for a few years when they want to settle down, do come back. So it obviously is a good thing. I think the day school, I think, has been a wonderful addition in helping to unify the younger generation, and a lot of those kids get to know the other Jewish kids. We grew up, my kids were all in Whitefish Bay, which has a lesser Jewish student body than, say, Nicolay would. But through Hebrew school and Sunday school, they knew other, Jewish kids. Interlochen is a fabulous resource for this community. And in fact, the one daughter who started as the lowest camper ended up as waterfront counselor, head counselor, and then assistant director. And then she moved to New York, and now lives in Florida otherwise, and still is, I think, on the camp board.
Were you active at the center at all?
No,
No.
no, it's
Just sent the kids to camp and...
sent the kids to camp there, and one year, Maury Meister talked me into being camp doctor for a week or half a week or something up there, which I really did get to, an appreciation for it, and that's why I said all our kids went there. So I think the community is still pretty much unified. Yeah, there's a east side and west side, but that's not...
Well, there was always an east side and west side. It
Right.
was social. Now it's religious.
Yeah, but it's...
Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, that's, more orthodox than this, but you've got orthodoxy on Mequon Road, you've got orthodoxy on the east side,
A lot of it.
and I've been involved a lot with the Witz kids, somehow as patients, and Rabbi Chuplowitz, a wonderful institution. So it's got, for what would be considered a small community, it's got a lot going for it. There's a lot of activity. There are more religious things in this world than raising money, although that is always the prime topic of almost every Jewish organization, from synagogue right on down. Finance has always become a problem. But there's a lot of activity, there's a lot of cohesiveness, and I think it's a very good Jewish community. I haven't been anyplace else to compare it to New York. The one year we spent in Detroit, we got to know a little bit of the community and we left. So I say I don't think the Milwaukeeans appreciate it as much as people who've lived elsewhere.
Maybe. Were you involved in the, when so many of the Russians came, being at Sinai, did you have anything to do, I mean, because they impacted, you know, they I don't know, something, they're like almost 10% or something of our population now, you know, when they came.
There's a large number, and we, of course, are on a list of physicians who would take care of them. But being a specialty, we had a limited relation with them. But yes, we saw some Russian patients, which had their own unique problems, some of them good, some of them not so good. But
What do you mean?
They grew up in a different culture, and some are more demanding.
Oh, that way.
You know, you got to do this for me, etc. Some were very impatient. Some are fabulous and wonderful, which is true of people in general.
Right.
So that was our relation with them.
I think the Federation, I may be wrong, but it seems to me that the Federation still makes a contribution to Sinai for something to do with, it could be the chaplaincy, but it might also have something to do with the Russian,
I don't know. At one time, the Federation supports the right, and paid for the Russian interpreter.
Right.
Which, of course, is important. But at one time, the Federation was a hindrance to Sinai insofar as it was difficult for Sinai to raise funds on their own, because the Federation would give them a little and say, no, we'll take care of you. And there was some schism there, but that goes back 30, 40 years.
Oh, indeed, yes.
Yeah.
I was just going through some of that stuff.
Right. It's
we called it unified fundraising.
right.
And I don't know what you all called it.
So that it's we called it a pain in the neck. But, you know, that's part of growing pains with any community. And I've got really, I feel blessed, as I say. I have not really been a victim of major anti-Semitism. I've come to Milwaukee, which I think is a great Jewish community, and my kids have managed to live through it without any major torments and grow up Jewish. And it's a comfortable place to live. An example is just driving. I don't know if you're familiar with New York at all.
No.
But I tell my friends out east that I live in Great Neck, which is one of the fancy suburbs out of Long Island. I live in Great Neck, I practice in Times Square, and it takes me 12 minutes to commute. If I stayed in New York, I would live out on Long Island. It would take me an hour to commute. You'd spend 2, 3, 4 hours a day driving, stuck in traffic jams, raising your blood pressure and going nuts. Always being second fiddle to some professor at the medical school, what have you. Here I was the professor at the medical school. And I did, as a matter of fact, reach the grade of clinical professor of orthopedic surgery. The orthopedic faculty was also close-knit under Dr. Blount, and we all helped each other. And we had a club for people from upstate just to come once a month with their problems so we could help them. We weren't in conflict with them or competition. We just wanted to help them. And as the numbers grew, they no longer needed that, and so the club has changed. Now the people upstate have 2, 3, and 4 partners of their own. But it was that type of good community professionally for me as well, so it was always very comfortable.
What do you have a thought or a feeling, or not a feeling, but an idea what's going to happen with Israel?
With Israel?
Yes, you've been involved with Israel on many levels.
Been involved with Israel, been there. As a matter of fact, I was, Hospital for Joint Disease being a Jewish Federation hospital, had guys go after the Six-Day War to help out. And that's how this exchange program started, in which I eventually went at first just to teach as the casualty thing went down, and then in teaching we took care of, I went to Arab clinic in Hebron and did all kinds of interesting things there, and then after the war went back, because so we have a close relationship, and we formed the American-Israeli Orthopedic Society, of which I was the second president, part of the organizing body. As a matter of fact, the first president wanted to incorporate so we could be a tax-deductible organization, and a good friend of his, an attorney in New York, wanted $10,000 to do all the legal work to incorporate it. In Milwaukee, it was much easier. I went to one of the guys I know and said, do it.
Yeah.
And it cost, $25 for the paperwork or something, because there is a much more charitable feeling in the community here. And so we did that, and we formed a scholarship to bring an Israeli over once a year to spend some time in North America, either in Canada or States. And so the future of Israel, my number one feeling is I think the Americans should keep out of it. I object to Americans living in Milwaukee or elsewhere telling people in Israel what they should do. We don't live there, and they know a lot better than we, and they're a lot smarter than we. It's a different culture. We can't put American standards on Israeli problems. And I have faith that they're going to take care of it. Unfortunately, it's going to take another 100 years. It's been
So
50.
in other words, you aren't so optimistic that the peace is going to be soon and lasting.
No, I think it's going to be slow and eventually lasting. Getting Arafat out of the way, of course, is a big plus. But you've got all the problems of the Middle East that you could spend weeks on. I have spent weeks on discussing, and it's not going to be easy. The Middle East, people who are willing to blow themselves up live by a different code than Westerners do.
Yeah.
And we've got, they've got support from around the world, and
They got a lot of.
there aren't that many Jews around.
Right.
So, but I'm optimistic that things will get better, and things seem to be better now than they were a few years ago, and hopefully will continue to improve. So I'm cautiously optimistic.
You're cautiously optimistic, yeah. I mean, you see what's going on with Iraq and everything every day. People are, it's just
Yeah, and that's
getting killed.
It's a whole different bit. There are people who, yes, it's their life's work to make trouble. Just as Arafat was a professional terrorist, so there are a lot of others. But progress is being made, and I think that I'm an optimist in life.
Yeah, I can see that.
Maybe it's just self-confidence, but I just knew things are going to work out, and for me they've worked out better than Betty and I will often walk through some far-off, God-forsaken land and look at each other and say, in our wildest dreams, did we ever imagine this would happen? And the answer is no. So the world has been good to me. I think I've been good to the world. When I was in college, my roommate, who had been a classmate in junior high and high school, and ended up going to medical school a year after me and became an orthopedic resident. This was not our original game plan, but it worked out that way. But we were in college once, sitting around, and what do you expect to accomplish in life? And the conclusion we came to was that the world should be better off for the fact that we were here.
Mm-hmm.
Hopefully I've helped a few people along the way, and that's come true, and that's all I really ask.
That's a good goal. That's a very nice
That
goal.
was, for a college kid, wasn't the worst thing in the world.
No, it wasn't. Just tell me one last thing. What do you plan to take at UWM or wherever you're going to take your...
I've been taking classes at UWM.
Are you with Tim Crain and...
Well, I'm co-leading his trip to Spain with him.
Oh, are you?
Yeah, I helped him a little bit on the island trip, and I've done a lot of work on the Spain trip. And so I've taken his classes. Right now, doing the just finished European Jewry, which is a wonderful class. And I would suggest if people have not taken the American Jewry, the three religions, he does a great job, and I like him a lot.
Everybody's nuts about him. He's got all Jews in that class. It's like
He
50
has-
people and only 10 non-Jews, and they're all...
Oh, no, he's got 50 people, 10 are students, and 40 are
That's-
Jewish auditors. There are
that's
no
right.
non-Jews.
I know.
It's an interesting, but in all classes, it's an interesting phenomenon. UWM took a class on Greek mythology. All the auditors were Jewish. Took class on China. All the auditors were Jewish. Maybe we just have a search for knowledge or what have you.
Well, I think so.
So I have not looked at next semester's bit, but I do a lot of philosophy, political science. If Tim's teaching a new course, I probably would take
He
that.
is the darling, that is for
He's
sure.
a favorite of the Jewish community right now, and he has a lot of Jewish philosophy behind him, even though he's an Irish Catholic. And we spent a long time discussing things, and he's an interesting guy, and I enjoy it. And we're looking forward to the Spain trip in 2 weeks.
Yeah, I know a couple of my friends are going on that, but a lot of the archivists who work with me on the collections are in his class, or one way or another, and so I feel like I know him already.
It's, well, he's doing the off-center JCC
Right.
this summer.
Yeah.
4 classes, which is 4 lectures to do what he did in 4 months at
Yeah,
UWM.
right.
But he's very well organized,
Yes.
and I'm sure everybody will enjoy it.
Is there anything that you, well, one of my questions is, you know what the questions are, you've got them right there at the end. Is there something about yourself that you think no one knows?
No, I think,
And you told me how you'd like to be remembered, because you wanted to have made a positive difference in the world, which I think you have. And is there anything we talked about the future of this community, the shape it's in? It's a good shape. We're going to expand, we're going to have a community campaign, we're going to have a Jewish museum in this building, a small one.
As I say, I think, and I'm sure people from the Federation have gone to other communities of equal size to see what they do and how they do it, but it's just, to me, a well-oiled machine that has worked well for the 44 years I've been here.
You're right.
And will continue and serves an important place in the community as a whole, as well
Yes.
as in the Jewish
Absolutely,
community. And,
absolutely.
It's,
That's what we're interested in, by the way, in the Historical Society, preserving our Jewish community and our contributions within the Milwaukee community. It's huge.
our first trip overseas, we went to Spain and Portugal. And in Portugal, I met the rabbi who opened the Ark for us in the synagogue. And there was 28 Sefer Torah with silver thing. And it was sad because it was there because every other synagogue in the entire country had closed and they shipped their Torahs down there. And his point was, Hitler tried to kill us one way, but they're killing us with kindness.
Yeah.
They're all assimilating. He's done a lot of funerals, but almost no weddings because of the assimilation. And you learn that you have to maintain your identity or you will get lost. And of course, the demography study that was done recently, pointed that out. And the fact that the population here, the Jewish population, has maintained its numbers is interesting and is important. And as long as it does that, it will maintain its identity, and the tone will be there.
We certainly have enough programs going on. You can't possibly go to everything
That's right.
going on.
That's right.
You can't. And it's good stuff. Some is better than the
Absolutely.
other, but there's something for everybody.
Absolutely, and they say, and I think that it's important to be recognized in the community. I don't want to speak for anybody else, but having conversation with Tim Crain, he was a great proponent of Weekland and his dialogue with the
Yeah.
Jewish community, and is not nearly as sanguine about Dolan. And of course, in my life, I never thought I'd see a pope who was an ex-Nazi, but that's hopefully we'll hope for the best. Yeah.
We'll see.
So it's
We'll
not my
see.
place to say, but
No, it isn't.
but I got a big mouth, so I
You'll
said
say it.
Yeah.
Okay, Paul. Well, thank you very much
It's been
for
a
coming in.
pleasure.
And I liked your suggestions on for the next time around. The Mount Sinai thing.
Yeah, I think it's
I think it's a good idea.